1 Samuel chapter 17. The Philistines gathered their army together for war. They came to Succoth in Judah. They set up camp at Ephes-dammim. It was between Succoth and Azekah. Saul and the army of Israel gathered together. They camped in the valley of Elah. They lined up their men to fight against the Philistines. The Philistine army was camped on the hill. Israel's army was on one another. The valley was between them. A mighty hero named Goliath came out of the Philistine camp. He was from Gath. He was more than 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his feet. He wore bronze armor that weighed 125 pounds. On his leg, he wore bronze guards. He carried a bronze javelin on his back. His spear was as big as weaver's rod. Each iron point weighed 15 pounds. The man who carried his shield walked along in front of him. Goliath stood there and shouted to the soldiers of Israel. He said, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? I am a Philistine. You are servants of Saul. Choose one of your men. Have him come down and face me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your slaves. But if I win and kill him, you will become our slaves and servants." Goliath continued, "This day I dare the soldier of Israel to send a man down to fight against me." Saul and the whole army of Israel heard what the Philistines said. They were terrified. David was the son of Jesse, who belonged to the tribe of Ephraim. Jesse was from Bethlehem in Judah. He had 8 sons. When Saul was king, Jesse was already very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul into battle. The oldest son was Eliab. The second was Abinadab. The third was Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest sons followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul's camp to Bethlehem. He went to Bethlehem to take care of his father's sheep. Every morning and evening Goliath came forward and stood there. He did it for 40 days. Jesse said to his son David, "Get at least half a bushel of grain that has been cooked. Also get 10 loaves of bread. Take all of it to your brothers. Hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 chunks of cheese to the commander of their military group. Find out how your brothers are doing. So bring me back some word about them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel. They are in the valley of Elah, and they are fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left his father's flock in the care of a shepherd. David loaded up the food and started out, just as Jesse had directed. David reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions. The soldiers were shouting the war cry. The Israelites had the Philistines were lining up their armies for battle. The armies were facing each other. David left what he had brought with the men who took care of the supplies. He ran to the battle lines and asked his brothers how they were. As David was talking with them, Goliath stepped forward from his line. Goliath was a mighty Philistine hero from Gath. He again dared someone to fight him, and David heard it. Whenever Israel's army saw Goliath, all of them ran away from him. That's because they were so afraid. The Israelites had been saying, "Just look at how this man keeps daring Israel to fight him. The king will make the man who kills Goliath very wealthy. The king will also give his own daughter to be the man's wife. The king will not require anyone in the man's family to pay any taxes in Israel." David spoke to the men standing near him. He asked them, "What will be done for the man who kills these Philistines? Goliath is bringing shame on Israel. What will be done for the one who removes it? The Philistine isn't even circumcised. He dares the armies of the living God to fight him. Who does he think he is?" The men told David what Israel's soldiers had been saying. The men told him what would be done for the man who killed Goliath. David's oldest brother Eliab heard him speaking with the man. So Eliab became very angry with him. Eliab asked David, "Why have you come down here? Who is taking care of those few sheep in the desert for you? I know how proud you are. I know how eager your heart is. The only reason you came down here was to watch the battle. What I have done now," said David. "Can I even speak?" Then he turned away to speak to some other men. He asked them the same question he had asked before. And they gave him in the same answer. And someone heard what David said and reported to Saul. So Saul sent for David. David said to Saul, "Don't let anyone lose hope because of the Philistines. I will go out and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out there and fight the Philistines. You are too young. He has been a warrior ever since he was a boy." But David said to Saul, "I have been taking care of my father's sheep. Sometimes a lion or bear would come and carry off a sheep from the flock. Then I would go after it and hit it. I would save the sheep it was carrying in its mouth. If it turned around to attack me, I would grab its hair. I would strike it down and kill it. In fact, I have killed both a lion and a bear. I will do the same thing to these Philistines. He isn't even circumcised. He has dared the armies of the living God to fight him. The Lord saved me from the paw of the lion. He saved me from the paw of the bear. And he will save me from the powerful hand of the Philistine too." Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own military clothes. He put a coat of armor on him. He put a bronze helmet on his head. David put a sword over his clothes. He walked around for a while in all that armor because he wasn't used to it. "I can go out there, all this armor," he said to Saul. "I'm not used to it." So he took it off. Then David picked up his wooden staff. He went down to a stream and chose 5 smooth stones. He put them in the pocket of his shepherd's bag. Then he took his sling in his hand and approached Goliath. At the same time, the Philistine kept coming closer to David. The man carrying Goliath's shield walked along in front of him. Goliath looked David over. He saw how young he was. He also saw how healthy and handsome he was, and he hated him. He said to David, "Why are you coming at me with the sticks? Do you think I'm only a dog?" The Philistine cursed David in the name of his gods. "Come over here," he said. "I will feed your body to the birds and wild animals." David said to Goliath, "You are coming to fight against me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. I'm coming against you in the name of the Lord who rules over all. He is the God of the armies of Israel. He is the one you have dared to fight against. This day the Lord will give me the victory over you. I will strike you down. I will cut your head off. This day I will feed the bodies of the Philistine army to the birds and wild animals. Then the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. The Lord doesn't rescue people by using a sword or a spear, and everyone here will know it. The battle belongs to the Lord. He will hand all of you over to us." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly to the battle to meet him. He reached into his bag. He took out a stone. He put it in his sling. He slung it at Goliath. The stone hit him on the forehead and sank into it. He fell to the ground on his face. So David won the fight against Goliath with a sling and a stone. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. He did it without even using a sword. David ran and stood over him. He picked up Goliath's sword and cut off his head with it. The Philistines saw that their hero was dead, so they turned around and ran away. Then the men of Israel and Judah shouted and rushed forward. They chased the Philistines to the entrance of Gath. They crushed them to the gate of Ekron. The bodies of the dead Philistines were scattered all along the roads to Gath and Ekron. That's the road that leads to Shaaraim. Israel's army returned from chasing the Philistine. They had taken everything from the Philistine camp. David picked up Goliath's head. He brought it to Jerusalem. He put Goliath's weapon in his own tent. Saul had been watching David as he went out to meet the Philistines. He spoke to Abner, the commander of the army. Saul said to him, "Abner, whose son is that young man?" Abner replied, "Your Majesty, I don't know, and that's just as sure as you are alive." The king said, "Find out whose son the young man is." After David killed Goliath, he returned to the camp. Then Abner brought him to Saul. David was still carrying Goliath's head. "Young man, whose son are you?" Saul asked him. David said, "I'm the son of Jesse from Bethlehem." 1 Samuel chapter 18. David finished talking with Saul. After that, Jonathan and David became close friends. Jonathan loved David just as he loved himself. From that time on, Saul kept David with him. He didn't let him return home to his family. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him just as he loved himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David. He also gave him his military clothes. He even gave him his sword, his bow, and his belt. David did everything Saul sent him to do. He did it so well that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. That pleased Saul's whole army, including his officers. After David had killed Goliath, the men of Israel returned home. The women came out of all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul. They danced and sang joyful songs. They played harps and tambourines. As they danced, they sang, "Saul has killed thousands of men. David has killed tens of thousands." That song made Saul very angry. It really upset him. He said to himself, "They're saying David has killed tens of thousands of men, but they're saying I've killed only thousands. The only thing left for him to get is the kingdom itself." From that time on, Saul watched David closely. The next day, an evil spirit sent by God came powerfully on Saul. Saul began to prophesy in his house. At that time, David began to play the harp, just as he usually did. Saul was holding a spear. He threw it at David. As he did, he said to himself, "I will pin David to the wall." But David got away from the twice. The Lord had left Saul and was with David. So Saul was afraid of David. He sent David away. He put him in command of 1,000 men. David led the troops in battle. In everything he did, he was very successful. That's because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful David was, he became afraid of him. But all the troops of Israel and Judah loved David. That's because he led them in battle. Saul said to David, "Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you to be your wife. Just serve me bravely and fight the Lord's battle." So Saul said to himself, "I won't have to lift my hand to strike him down. The Philistine will do that." But David said to Saul, "Who am I? Is anyone in my full family that important Israel? Am I worthy to become the king's sons-in-law?" The time came for Saul to give his daughter Merab to David. Instead, Saul gave her to Adriel from Mahola to be his wife. Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David. When they told Saul about it, he was pleased. "I will give her to David to be his wife." Saul said to himself, "Then maybe she will trap him, and maybe the Philistine will track him down." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second chance to become my son-in-law." Then Saul gave an order to his attendants. He said, "Speak to David in private. Tell him, the king likes you. All his attendants love you. So become his son-in-law." Saul's attendants spoke those very words to David. But David said, "Do you think it's just small things to become the king's son-in-law? I am only a poor man. I'm not very well known." Saul's attendants told him what David had said. Saul said, "Tell David, here's the price the king wants for the bride. He wants you to kill 100 Philistines. Then bring back the skins you cut off when you circumcise them." That's how Saul will get even with his enemies. Saul hoped that the Philistine would strike David down. Saul's attendants also told David those things. Then David was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So before the wedding day, David and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. They circumcised the Philistines, and David brought back all the skins. They counted out the full number and gave them to the king. By doing that, David could become the king's son-in-law. So Saul gave David his daughter Michal to be his wife. So Saul realized that the Lord was with David. He also realized that his daughter Michal loved David. So Saul became even more afraid of him. As long as Saul lived, he remained David's enemy. The Philistine commanders kept on going out to battle. Every time they did, David had more success against them than the rest of Saul's officers. So his name became well known.